So now let's have a look at 30 big blinds, cutoff versus small blind versus big blind on Ace-96 Rainbow. Starting with the small blind range here. Not a great flop for the small blind. Our range is quite capped because we will have 3-bet pre-flop with all of our best hands, so 6s or higher is pure 3-betting pre, so we never have a set. Ace-Jack or better is pure 3-betting pre, so we never have a top pair better than Ace-10. We do have a bunch of Ace-9 offsuit, so we have a decent amount of 2-pair here with Ace-9 and Ace-6 suited. But altogether here we're looking at 6.3% 2-pair and 16.5% top pair, most of it not very good top pair. So, unsurprisingly, we are essentially dark checking as the small blind here. And of course the big blind has an even much weaker range here, basically never connects with this board, only 1.5% top pair, or 2-pair, and 6.5% top pair, also dark checking. And the in-position player is betting a ton. 70%, essentially all of it for the small size. Again, this is a situation where surely it is fine to just drop the big size. There are no hands that pure choose big size. I don't think it is adding any significant EV to the range. So we're only going to concern ourselves with the small bet. In practice, I think you can just play only small bets here, and that is fine. What else is there to note about this range? So, one potentially surprising thing here is that we do actually have checks with the sets. I think having a pretty low SPR here so that we can easily get the money in across 2 streets with the sets is a big contributing factor there. And neither other player having a whole lot of connection with the board, especially the big blind having virtually no connection with the board. When we do check behind, if we were strictly uncapped and even keeping a few very strong hands in our range, even still, the small blind will put a lot of money in after we check behind. And so we can get a competitive amount of value checking our sets as opposed to betting them, unlike many of the previous spots we had looked at where you were very unlikely to close the action with top of range by calling or checking. Here you do see a little bit of that, but really only with the sets and a little bit of the 2-pair. When you step down to top pair, the better top pairs are all pure betting, and you are only checking some of the worse ones. These Ace-10 to Ace-King hands are not quite good enough to want to trap with. We want to bet right away. Beyond that, it's a high enough frequency, kind of merged enough spot that we do see a bunch of betting with second pair. Though we do pure check kings and queens, those hands just don't gain enough by betting and are not vulnerable at all against hands that they're already ahead of, so they are natural checks. But the pair of 9s have outs to improve, need protection a little bit more. Same with pocket 10s and, to a lesser extent, pocket jacks. Those hands need protection and want to bet. Continuing down to the smaller pairs, same deal, lots of betting, including even the under pairs, more 4s and 3s than 5s. And then close to all of your unpaired stuff, that's pretty often exactly King, Queen, and King, Jack are checking a bunch. But mostly you want to go ahead and bluff with everything weak. Looking at the whole range together, you can see all of that. Lots of betting with almost everything, and then there are a few hands that make sense as natural high-frequency checks, and it's not quite crushing enough of a board that we simply pure bet everything. So stepping through down the B25 line, first I'm going to skip over the small blind, say the small blind folds, and it is heads up against the big blind. We have a nice super clean strategy right here. No raising, the big blind is just super far behind, less than 10% top pair or better. And just call every pair, including even almost all of your deuces, although it appears that you're mixing a little bit of fold with some of them. And call every 8 out straight draw, every 4 out straight draw. And then just a tiny bit of exactly King 10 plus backdoor is also continuing. Or rather, King 10 plus backdoor is pure continuing, but that is the only hand other than pairs and straight draws that continues at all. So, super clean, simple strategy here, not a lot to talk about. Just don't have nearly enough hands that want to raise for value, and do have a lot of hands that want to call. And when your range has that shape with your rare super strong hands, just pure slow playing dominates playing aggressively anyhow, because in position is going to funnel so much money in on turns and rivers against your generally very weak range that you prefer to trap when you do have, say, a 6 for 2 pair, or even just a good top pair. Now, stepping back to the small blind, we have a considerably more complicated strategy. The small blind does have quite a few hands that are good enough to raise. Very notably, Ace 10 is a full 2% of your... Ace 10 is a full 3% of your range. No, I'm not managing to highlight them both together. Ace 10 suited is 2% of your range, and Ace 10 off is an additional 3. So altogether 5% of your range in Ace 10. Ace 9, even more. 3.3 for the offsuit combo, and another 1.35 for the suited, so about the same, another 5%. You do have quite a few hands that are good enough to raise. And then, of course, you can slot in some more medium stuff and various types of semi-bluffs, including as weak as Queen 8 plus backdoor can get in there as a raise at some frequency. That's a kind of tricky one to find, Queen 8 and King 7, but, you do need to have some stuff to match with your range of mainly top pairs and pair of 9s and gut shots and such. But you are also calling a bunch. This is one of those nodes where, unfortunately, we do not have a super clean strategy. You have a bunch of hands like these better 9s here, and some of these unpaired backdoor hands and the worse aces that play very naturally as calls. Some of them pure calls like these 9s, some of them mixed. So yeah, you are forced to play 2 ranges here, which does make life a little bit more complicated, but when that is the shape of your range, there is not a whole lot you can do. Carrying on from here, let's take a look at what happens after the small blind calls. The big blind now does get a small amount of raising. The thing to think about here is, whereas in the heads-up pot, when the small blind folded, you would pure call all of your strongest hands to play them as traps, because you were slotting those into a very weak range, and you are going to face a ton of aggression from the cutoff. Here, the small blind is kind of protecting you, and you will not extract nearly the same amount of value playing the top of your range passively. So this now becomes one of those sort of spots where you don't want to close the action playing passively with most of the top of your range. If you look at the two pairs here, A6 blocking some continues from the other players and needing less protection does sometimes call, but 9-6 is pure raising. And with the top pairs, Ace-8 is pure raising, and you're raising a little bit with other top pairs as well. And then you are matching that with a variety of other bluffs at various frequencies. A little tiny bit of second pair, just a little bit of 9-8 and 9-7. Little tiny bit of 6x, but predominantly just gut shots, a little bit of open-ender, mainly just the natural bluffing combos here. I don't see anything too surprising. It's just pairs and gut shots that are going into the raise along with most of the top of your range. And of course, that's still adding up to only 4% frequency to raise. Your range is quite weak, but you do still want to continue with every top pair. Vast majority of your second pair, although some 9-7 is folding, it looks like 93% of your top pair or second pair is continuing. Then going down to third pair, it's more like 88% of that. You do fold a little bit of these with kickers 10 through 5. Note that those are the kickers on which straights complete, so you're going to get less value on your turn to two pairs with those combos, so you continue them a little bit less. But mostly you are just still getting to the turn with every pair. I think deuces is now folding, but every pair matching the board, with the exception of a few of the ones that have the worst two pair outs. And then once again, pure continuing every gut shot or better. No longer continuing this King 10 backdoor. All very natural and straightforward stuff. Not that much to say about how this range plays behind the small blind call. The real main thing to note here is that whereas when you are heads up against the opener, you choose to pure slow play the top of your range and play no raises. Now that we have a call in there, we can no longer rely on the cutoff to pile money in with nothing and value bet very thin, and we do need to fast play the top of our range to get value. Now, stepping back and looking at the small blind raise, this is an interesting phenomenon that we have here. I think a lot of humans would be likely to get this wrong. It does not necessarily feel natural to continue exclusively by cold calling at a node where you're only continuing 6% of the time, of which 1.8 of that is two pair. And another, well, you have a little over 2%, 8 out straight draws, although you only continue a bit more than half of them. But your range is a lot of two pair, a lot of open-enders. That seems like a natural range to play aggressively, but with the cutoff behind you and in position against the raiser on a static board, you actually just want to see the turn. You want to be able to leverage the value of position, get to see the turn, make your straights when you have the 8 out straight draw, which is a big piece of your range. And yeah, you continue exclusively by calling. And there are a few other interesting things about your range here. You are folding a decent amount of top pair, most of the ace-4, ace-3, ace-2 without a backdoor. You do pure continue with the backdoor here. But you need ace-7 plus to pure continue. Or actually, even ace-7 is folding a sliver. Ace-8 is pure continue. So you need quite a strong hand to continue it all here, and yet you play it all passively. And the other thing to note here is that while you do fold a decent amount of your top pair, in fact, 60% of it, at the same time, you also continue just a sliver of your second pair. King 9 and Queen 9 with a backdoor are mixing a little bit of continue. Notably, only hearts. King 9 of hearts is pure continuing. Queen 9 of hearts is mixing continues. This is a notable mechanic here that you want to match the suit of the ace rather than matching the suit of the 6, because that significantly decreases the frequency that you're against a better flush draw. Or in the case of King 9, you now have the nut flush on hearts run out, or Queen 9, you have the second nuts and rarely run into better. So just this tiny bit of 9x slots into your range in a very nice way, where, you know, if the turn is a 10 or a 5, you're going to improve to a straight a bunch of the time, and your range is going to be very, very strong, and these are going to be nice hands to bluff with. So it makes sense that you slot just a little bit of other stuff in along with your top pair and your open ender. So let's look quickly at what the cutoff does behind raise and call. Now, once again, we see this mechanic of a very aggressive response closing the action, even though cutoff is in position, even though this is a pretty static board. The big blind is continuing this range that is very often an open-ended straight draw, and it is significant to deny equity to, well, largely to the big blind, but also to the small blind. And the cutoff needs quite a strong hand to continue anyhow, so this is not quite to the level of extremity where the cutoff plays 0 calls, but of the 45% that the cutoff continues, only less than 13 of that is by calling. And in fact, quite a lot of it is by just shoving, even though that is nearly a pot-sized raise on a pretty static board. There is also some kind of click 3 betting here. And let's just look at the combo choices here. Aces is pure click 3 betting. And then 9s and 6s are actually slow playing. That's a kind of interesting mechanic here. I guess part of what's going on here is that when the cutoff has aces, that is killing quite a lot of big blind's one-pair hands and tilting them heavily towards having the open ender or 9-6. So those are hands that I assume are going to continue against the click. Yeah, the open ender calls or shoves, 9-6 calls. So you are eager to put money in, blocking hands that will fold to the raise and unblocking hands that will call. Whereas when you have the other two sets, the opposite is the case. You want to slow play, blocking continues and unblocking folds. And then strong top pairs are almost pure playing aggressively. see just a little bit of calling with ace-king. Mostly just going all in. A little bit of clicking. The clicking is largely, but not exclusively, with a backdoor flush draw. With the best hands, you're choosing the click pure with ace-king with a backdoor, ace-queen with a backdoor, and then playing more aggressively without the backdoor. Would get down to ace-10, it's just pure all-in with all of it. And yeah, just quite an aggressive response from the cutoff. Looking at which hands, other than value, are playing aggressively, you see some jamming with king-9 backdoor, especially king-9 of hearts. Queen-9, jack-9. In this case, seems you were choosing diamonds as the one that wants to go all in with the lower kickers. 10-9 is pure taking aggressive actions, mainly shoving with the backdoors or clicking without the backdoor. 9-8 is beginning to fold some without the backdoor, pure fold without the backdoor, pure all in with it. So an awful lot of your all-in range that is not top pair is just second pair. In fact, I think that's all of it, actually. The all-in range is just top pairs and ace-6 for 2 pair and some second pair hands. And this is going to block the strongest hands for the other players, block the 2 pair combos when you have the 9, and put pressure on top pairs. I imagine we are not getting pure called by every top pair. Yeah, so cutoff is all in. And in fact, even ace-10 is mixing folds as the small blind, but 8-7 is pure calling off. You're just getting a direct price to call, even though you are always against either a pair of 9s or a pair of aces. And yeah, overall, you see the small blind folding 45% of top pair. And this is a thing I don't think a lot of humans get right. I don't think that you see people check raising top pair to fold in these lines. I mean, if they got here with the big blind having cold called in between, I do think they maybe end up folding these hands, but I think they don't raise the weaker top pairs as often as they should. And I don't know that there's anything in particular I want to do to exploit that as the cutoff. I think that shoving this 9x stuff probably still makes sense. And supposing the small blind folds, again, you see the big blind is now folding most ace-7 and all of the worst ace-x, and the 9x, of course. And interestingly, you see 8-7 off here is actually folding. With the player behind, calling 8-7 off is a little bit better because you're actually pretty excited to end up all in 3 ways with an open ender. But closing the action is now close. You need a backdoor with it to call. Without a backdoor, it is losing around half a big blind. yeah, all pretty straightforward stuff in terms of the response to the shove from these two players. Stepping back and looking at the smaller raise. First of all, what are the less nutty hands in the smaller raise? See some 10-8, some 10-9, some 8-7 in the smaller raise, but never in the all-in. And also a little bit of ace-5 and ace-8. Yeah, a little bit of a few different things here in the click. And looking at the small blind here, difficult stuff. You are playing some call and figure it out with various things, although you are mostly just putting it in with the hands good enough to continue. Just for completeness, let's look at all in and what does the big blind need to call. Two pair or the open ender. And what do you need to overcall here? Good ace, two pair. Kind of funny stuff, overcalling 10-8 here at the back door. You're getting a very good price at this point. But more interestingly, more significantly, let's look at after a call. Again, one of these notes where closing the action, you mostly play aggressively with your continues, a little bit of overcalling as well. But more importantly, after a fold, what is the big blind doing? Here now, relatively passively, again, you need quite a strong hand to continue, but you're still kind of behind the cutoff range and do want to just play passively and trap and see the turn and take your equity with your open ender stuff. Yeah, so I think that covers the aggressive play from the cutoff behind the raise and cold call. Of course, the cutoff is also continuing by calling some here, including, as we said, trapping with these sets, calling with some of the worst top pair, and then also quite a lot of calling with hands with straight outs, 2/3 of your 8-7, almost all of your gut shots are just calling, and then also calling with some second pair. And that's about the extent of the overcalls. But, this is a low reach line. The more important one, of course, is after the big blind folds, how is the cutoff playing? And now we are back to, the same thing we were used to seeing in heads-up pots, where the in-position player plays mostly passively. There's a little bit of clicking it here, just to sort of, there's a little bit of equilibrating going on here where the cutoff wants to deny some equity to the small blind semi-bluffs and disincentivize check raising with medium stuff a little bit. But primarily continuing by calling, after you call, there will be 18.5 in the pot, 22.5 to play. There's no difficulty getting stacks in with a strong hand here. You do want to just call and see the turn and play in position. And you'll see, the very strongest hands here are pure slow playing. Sets and two pairs are pure slow playing. The aggression is coming mainly from top pairs and bluffs, specifically mainly really centered around ace-jack and ace-queen more than ace-king, and I imagine not the backdoor flush draws. If you look at the two-card backdoor flush draws, none of the top pair two-card backdoor flush draw is fast playing. Those are all strong enough and play well enough on later streets that you prefer a slow play. And then what are the weak hands in the 3-bet range? A little bit of second pair, including pocket 10s, a little bit of pocket 7s, and a little bit of this 10-7 gut shot, and a few worse aces. Really pretty typical flop low SPR sort of 3-betting range. Similar to the sort of thing you would be likely to see if this were a heads-up pot opener against big blind kind of scenario. Centered around good but not great value hands with pure slow plays with the very best stuff, and a little bit of a variety of other things. And let's just quickly go down the tree after the click. The small blind is, has very few hands here that are ahead of the value 3-bets, such as, the ace, queen, ace, jack type of stuff. 20% two-pair at this node for the small blind, which of course is a lot more than you started the street with. You've now taken an aggressive action and a somewhat lower frequency one, and your range is much stronger, but yeah, so up to 20% two-pair, and notably those are pure slow playing. The top pairs that put it in are mainly the ace 10, and then also putting it in with a little bit of 8-7, and that looks like that is the extent of the hands that you play aggressively here. Let me just scroll through and see if I'm missing anything. Yeah, the shove is just strictly ace 10, a little bit of ace 8, and with 8-7, it is, a few different, all of the combos of 8-7 plus backdoor, whereas 8-7 without the backdoor is playing pure call. And stepping through just to this last node, all in, and what does in position do? The in position player has put in 40%-ish of effective stacks here, and there's not going to be a whole lot of folding. It's only 16% to fold at this node. Top pair is never folding. Even the 10-7 gut shot is nearly priced in. Pure calling with spades, mixing with diamonds for whatever reason. Probably something to do with the frequencies of different suits for small blinds 8-7. You're actually just ahead with 10 high here significantly often against a range that contains a whole lot of 8-7. So you have a pretty close one with your gut shot. That's kind of fun little mechanic. But yeah, so you are calling it off with top pair, mostly calling it off with 10-7. Almost entirely folding second pair. Just exactly the 9-8 of hearts is good enough to call. That is a peculiar little mechanic, but somehow exactly 9-8 is worth quite a lot. But the other pairs of 9s are not. It is not immediately obvious to me why that would be. Well, I guess this is the only pair of 9s in. Oh yeah, no, that's straightforward enough. This is the only pair of 9s in the cutoff range that has a backdoor flush draw. So yeah, with your backdoor flush draw, you can call off the pair of 9s by a decent margin. Actually, it's worth 2.5 big blinds. But other than that, the second pair and third pair hands are folding, and that is the extent of it.